Watch him throw the ball, we gon' pick it off. You gon' let him hit the hole or you gon' cut it off. You gon' play through fourth and long or you gon' punt it off. Your defenders heavy hitters, put your pads in. Don't be looking for the ref to throw no flags in. Keep the helmet on, keep the cleats tight. You the type to want to win by any means, right? You should look alive, this is Trap or Dive.
Yeah, I saw that head nod, Dre, you know, during the intro. You know, that's my thing too.
Yeah, just the blood flow.
Yeah, welcome back to another episode of Trap or Dive Podcast. I'm your host of Trap or Dive Podcast, Molly Mo. The fellas are in here, AJ and Dre is checking in. And today we got the good man, John Keim of ESPN, joining us. The tested warrior of Ashburn, the OG of Ashburn. Appreciate you joining us, boss man. How are you feeling today?
I'm feeling cold because you look outside and it's still frigid. So that's how I'm feeling. But overall, okay. Otherwise, you know, just like everybody else in this area.
Have you been outside in the mornings? It's been like 5-6 degrees outside. Yeah. Have you stepped outside any?
Yes, because we have a dog that likes to go on walks, and you know, even though it's that cold, you don't want to take him on long walks, but he still needs to go outside to do some business. And then today I was able to actually. We had a neighbor that was able to plow out our driveway. Like we have a really friendly neighbor who did that for everybody in our little enclave. Oh yeah. But there were some areas where it's like today was the first day I could get up like some of those blocks that felt like cement the last couple of days. So I had to do that this morning. So kind of exercise, I guess.
It's tough out there. I ain't gonna lie to you, AJ. I don't think you experience. Dre, have you done it at all? I know you gotta.
Oh yeah. I mean, I was out this morning. I mean. I had my daughter got her license today, yay! But the dog, my dog, man, he is driving me crazy. Like, and when I'm in his house, because he can't go out and play like he normally do. Sometimes we'll go on runs, we'll go out, but he is driving me absolutely crazy because he doesn't want to go outside without me. So I have to go outside with him and slide with him through this ice.
Well, the hard part is where they're trying to do their business, and he can't find his usual spots. And he's like, he doesn't want to walk on top of the ice. But man, the ice is so bad, the snow's so thick, you can kind of see from far away where he's done his business because it kind of sticks out a little bit. But that's been the hard part because he goes outside, he's like, I can't get over here. I used to go over here. This bathroom is closed. This bathroom is closed. Like, just stop, man. You got all this sidewalk. You got this or that. That's also like that. That adds like 5 minutes at a time where him just searching around trying to find.
Yeah, I'm about to start taking her out. I dug some territory for her out back, like 20 minutes the first day. So like that's what I've been doing the past few days. But enough dog business. Let's go ahead and get into the Washington Commanders. I mean, they finally got their coordinators, John, and David Blough offensively and Daronte Jones defensively. The last one took about a week and a half, 2 weeks. Am I tripping? Like about two weeks search. It
was longer.
What do you?
That was like 3 years.
Okay, 3 weeks. Yeah. So where are you at in terms of just your overall thoughts? But like, what does it like indicate to you? In terms of the direction that you thought they could have been down and what actually happened. Not to indicate you did believe one thing or another, but where you at?
So are you talking about like just the defensive coordinator position?
Actually, well, we can start there. Yeah, let's start with Daronte.
So I think like what it tells me, first of all, you knew there were changes coming. Like as soon as Dan Quinn took over the play calling, you knew this was going to happen. And I think it certainly indicates that they did not believe that obviously the injuries were to blame for everything on both sides of the ball. So there is that. And then I think it's also like, is there anything you can do better or different that may help your defense? Because this is going outside of Dan Quinn's comfort zone as a defensive coordinator, what he's typically run. If Daronte Jones comes in and runs the Brian Flores system, or at least his version of that, it's different than what Quinn has been running. So that, like, you know, you have to be on board and be comfortable with running something that maybe goes against, but is not quite what you have run. So I think, like, it indicates, like, you not just that it was your system that was the issue, but is there another way to do what you want to do? And they've always talked about being aggressive, being physical. And every defensive coordinator comes in saying that, right? Like, every single one I've ever covered comes in saying the same thing. But this is a defense that is proven, like, that what Flores has done has been that. And Jones has been a key part of that, especially in the back end. So, you know, I think it indicates a willingness to, like, hey, sometimes you have to kind of step outside that comfort zone a little bit to get better. And whether or not it works, we'll see. But I am intrigued by this hire in a big way.
So I guess I want to ask is, you know, do you think that Dan Quinn's perceived, like, job security led him to feel comfortable enough to take these risks with first-time offensive coordinator in the NFL and a first-time defensive coordinator in the NFL on both sides of the ball going into year 3?
I mean, you know, the job security is certainly something that's going to be at stake. Like, how much he's on this hot seat, I don't know, like, anybody could really say, but you know that after this year, this is a pivotal year for him. So I think there's part of me says, like, we all know that, and yet he still went this route. Why? Like, what is his faith in both Blough and Jones that led him this way? I will also say there were definitely some defensive coordinator candidates who maybe would have looked at this job and said, I don't know if I want to go there, because maybe in a year you're looking for another job. Nobody wants that. So if you notice, like, and I don't know that Jonathan Gannon was deciding between here and the Packers, but if you're Gannon, you're looking at both jobs. Like, if it came down to him, like, okay, you got Micah Parsons and a coach over here who just signed an extension, or you got over here where they have to really rebuild that talent base and you don't know what's going to happen. Like, that, I think, plays into it. But then you have a guy like Jones who's looking for his first shot. So that, I think, you know, who he wants a shot, and he was impressive in interviews from teams I talked to. So it makes sense that he would be a guy that's like, yes, I'm going to jump at this chance. For Quinn, again, I think it does say, like, it does speak to what is, you know, there has to be a certain confidence level that this is going to work. It also could be, in my analogy has been, this feels like if you're running a trick play, like, sometimes you see a guy call a trick play, and, like, if it works, like, holy, whatever, that was a genius call. What do you say if it doesn't work? Like, what were you thinking? You know what I mean? So, like, there's part of me that feels like it's a little bit like that. Like, if this works, you could have a really good coordinator on offense, a really good guy on defense, and look really good. But if it doesn't, if it goes really south, then, you know, like it kind of did with Bieniemy a couple of years ago with Rivera, and for a lot of different reasons. But that is something that, you know, you wonder about, right? But I do think it speaks to his confidence level, I think, in these hires, because they all know this is a pivotal year. They all know it.
Now, staying on Daronte Jones, what kind of autonomy do you foresee him having as far as the philosophy on the team? Like, are we going to see a full shift in philosophy from what we know of as a Dan Quinn scheme to what Daronte Jones brings to the table? And not only that, will he have the autonomy to bring in some of his guys, maybe on the defensive staff? Like, how much defensive staff shakeup do you foresee happening?
Well, I definitely see defensive staff shakeup, and whoever was bringing these guys in, whether it's Jones or Quinn or both, I definitely see that. We've already seen Jason Simmons already left. I do think there are going to be some other coaches who either leave, get reassigned, whatever it is. So I do expect changes there, and nobody should be surprised by that, given the way the defense is played. They just, even when they were healthy, they didn't look great. So, like, this is not there wouldn't be a big shock. So as far as what he was able to run, I don't know. But I think if you're Quinn and you're bringing him on, and if you're Jones and coming here, like, if this is your first shot, you better make sure that you're going to have, like, hey, this is how I see defenses needing to be played. If I'm not going to get that, and this is your first shot, what if this is your only shot? Like, you better go where you have a chance to succeed. And if you're going to do that, you better go where you feel like I can run what I need to run. Now, I think with Quinn there, you would want input. Quinn's been has been a very good defensive coach in this league. If you're not taking input, that doesn't make sense. And I think one thing for Jones that's good here is he's worked under different schemes and under different very good defensive coaches. And so I think, it seems like he's learned something from each one of them that I don't think that's going to stop when he's here. So it could be still a collaboration of things, and maybe how but if I'm Jones, you're interviewing, this is how I see defensive needing to be played. This is what I like about the Flores system and how it can be implemented here. But there are also elements of other defenses that you can also maybe combine that. But I would think that there's going to be a collaboration, but I don't know until we get into the season. We really won't know, right? It's everybody, how it is too. In the offseason, it all sounds great. It's all going to be this and all that. But when you get into the season and there's a lot more heat during the game, what really happens? That's when we'll find out how much of collaboration is. But the other part of this too is, and you're right, with bringing talent in that he knows, you almost have to. I just don't know from Minnesota if there are really guys that are going to be available to do that. But there are going to be guys that you can say, this guy fits what I want to do. This is what I'm looking for out of this position. Then it's up to guys like Adam Peters to go out and find that guy. I want a safety who can do this, this, and this. Go get him, right? So I think, you'll get some of that for sure. Because again, if you're him, should you be leaving unless you have that assurance that you're going to have, be able to run what you want to run, but with collaboration. And I stress that word collaboration because you hear that a lot from them over there about both sides of the ball.
In your talks with the people that you discuss in terms of just gathering information with for Blough and as well as Jones, philosophy or scheme aside, from a coaching perspective, what is, or did you find out what that one trait or common trait or characteristic of that individual, Blough and Jones, did you come to find out what that is? What's something that stand out between both of those two?
Well, I think with Jones, like I said, the interviews were really good. And to the point where Quinn asked someone what am I missing with this? Why isn't he hired yet? And others have kind of felt like I heard that from others as well, just that aspect of it. So, I think there's that. You look at his resume, he has earned this spot. There is no doubt. Minnesota has one of the best defenses. He's been the pass game coordinator. The logical next step for Jones is this. And people in Minnesota would tell you it was just a matter of time before he got one of these jobs. So I think there's, and if you're from Quinn, I think they like that. They like that he's worked under multiple schemes. And again, the multiple, the Vance Joseph, Marvin Lewis, Mike Zimmer, in addition to Flores. I think that definitely appealed to them, which suggests that there's going to be some versatility and not necessarily wedded to one particular scheme. I think we've seen that over the years. If a young guy comes in, sometimes they might hey, this is my scheme, this is my system, and they're hell bent on running it, and doesn't fit the personnel. Well, he's been in enough schemes and systems where you can maybe evolve what you want to do as you get the pieces that you need. Because I don't know that you can transform this defense overnight to play exactly the way you want to play in year one. I think that would be a little bit difficult. So that part appealed to him too. With Blough, the appeal was they from the beginning, you would hear this from Kingsbury first about how bright and sharp Blough was as a player, one of the smartest players he's coached. And then you'd hear that from others. So I think I know from Quinn's perspective, there was early on in that process, you would hear two names, David Blough and Mike McDaniel. And there was, to wait for McDaniel would have cost you Blough. And then would you have gotten McDaniel? That was always the risk there. And there was no guarantee. As we saw, Mike was up for multiple head coaching jobs. And then it would have been okay, you're up for head coach jobs. And then what's the best coordinator job for you? Just because they have, I think it's great to have a relationship with guys. It's great to be really good friends with a guy and want to work with a guy. I talked to one coach who was up for stuff, and he's loves the quarterback, loves Quinn, but the job security was a concern. So I think anybody who's established would have that level of concern. So, and I'm kind of long-winded here, but those are only two names you really heard. But so McDaniel, obvious, right? With Blough, it was they didn't want to let a young coach get out of the building. So they rather than roll the dice and maybe have McDaniel choose between you and a few other jobs, it was, we have this guy in the building. Detroit wants him. You know, if we sit there and wait for McDaniel, you're going to lose this guy, and then what might you get? So, and then I think the familiarity with the rapport he has with Jane Daniels is a big key as well. It's not like Jane saying, hire this guy or I'm going to pout. That's not how Jaden is. But I do think that rapport and familiarity helps. And he got a familiarity with the entire offense. So, like, he knows what these guys can do. He's not coming in blind and saying, like, what is this guy? That he knows. He's been in the meetings with all these guys. So I think all that played into why they want to get him. And the last thing is, when Quinn was in Atlanta and Kyle Shanahan left to go to San Francisco, he allowed some of those young coaches to leave the building. I think there was a lesson learned from that time that, hey, if you got some young guy in the building that you really like and you think he's going to be special, find a way to keep him. And so will it work? I don't know, but I do think like all those played into it.
So, John, you recently did an amazing interview on the John Keim podcast with Greg Williams, one of my favorite defensive minds. And we've seen in his tenure with Washington and other places, Buffalo and so on, do a lot with little. Didn't necessarily have like perennial all-pros or Pro Bowlers and stuff like that. And he said in the conversation that you two had, one of his favorite defensive minds is Brian Flores because of how much he puts the pressure on the quarterback to focus on pre-snap and post-game. Like post-snap. Like they're dictating things to the quarterback instead of the offense, the other side. So with Washington interviewing Brian Flores and him, unfortunately going back to Minnesota, do we believe that in those conversations, at some point, hey, we're not going to be able to get you. Who do you think is the next best guy relative to you? And that's how Daronte came about so late in the process and being hired, because it seems like they want to run, something similar to what they faced when they got spanked 31-0. Do you believe that had anything to do with the how quick Daronte got hired in comparison to how many other candidates they interviewed previously to him?
Yeah, no, I have not been told that, like, oh yeah, Flores was just raving about him. I think it's kind of logic, right? Like, if you're in there, what the system is, that like Jones was considered his right-hand guy, right? And when you talk about the disguising coverages, well, that's the pass game coordinator is going to have clearly a big role in that. So it makes sense that his name would have come up. And so I'm sure that his name would have come up at some point, whether it's in the beginning, or maybe if Flores calls and says, hey, I'm going to stay in Minnesota. He got a nice raise out of this. Like, I think that was always like, create leverage for yourself. But in those conversations, at some point, you would expect him to say, I've got a guy that if you're looking to do this, this is the guy. And I'm pretty sure, like, these guys all, you brought up Greg Williams. Greg Williams always had a book on coaches. Like, he prided himself on knowing having a scouting report on every coach. So if something happened, he could do it, that he could fill a spot. So I'm pretty sure like you would know about him to begin with, but then this, like, let me tell you more about him. So I would think that would be the case. It would just make sense. For sure. And that's how Carl Scott's name got on their radar. Like, they wanted somebody who was experienced as a play caller. And obviously Jones does not have that in the NFL. He does have 1 year at LSU, but to have someone vouch for you, and keep in mind, like, Flores and Adam Peters have a really good relationship. They were together for 4 or 5 years in New England when Flores was the Miami coach. My understanding is that he and Peters still talked a lot. So and then when they played them in Minnesota, they had a very friendly reunion before the game. So I'm quite sure at some point that Jones's name would have come up as a guy, like, this is a guy you're going to want. And so, I do believe that.
I guess a second part of my question also is, do we look at how Brian Flores' scheme is and how it dictates things so much as Dan Quinn realizing it's beneficial to probably get that in Washington due to the fact of lack of talent. Because if you look at Minnesota's defense, you're not seeing a Myles Garrett, a Micah Parsons, you're not seeing Aiden Hutchinson. I mean, there's just guys that do their damn job, from Van Ginkel to Jonathan Grenard, who they got from Houston, but there's no like top tier players. Do you think that also plays a major role in this offseason, as we believe it to be pivotal? We don't know what security's been provided from Josh Harris and so on, but knowing that they have cap room to spend, but also not the draft capital, do you think that became even more increasingly valuable to them to bring that scheme into here to mix along with what DQ likes and maybe the other family trees of the Vance Josephs of the world, Mike Zimmer and so on?
Yes, I think any coach who can get whatever out of the talent in this day and age, it frees you up to maybe spend more over here, right? So, I do believe that would have to play a factor in this. Now, like you brought up Greg Williams. Greg was really good at creating, and he loves to talk about the packages that he would have. And he would talk to us like, I've got 22 packages and I can, do this and this. And it's funny because I always laugh because the next week he'd say, well, all you guys talk about how many packages I have. It's really not about that. But he did have a lot. And I always respected how he could find whatever for some safety. Like he's got 3 packages he does really well in. Get him in those packages, right? So like he maximized the ability that way. And I think Minnesota did the same thing. Harrison Smith is not what he used to be. He's still an effective player there because of how they use him and because of his smarts. But just the pressure looks they give quarterbacks. I also think that in that game, like they dictated big time to Washington as much as anybody all year. Like, you are going to do this because we're doing this. Like they played offensive football on defense. And I think that appealed as well. And if you're trying to get more takeaways and more big plays, that's how you do it. And they made it difficult for Washington. Like you'd watch them, and going back and watching that game again after the fact, like there were a lot of times like Minnesota had the answers, or like we know that if we do this, you can only do one of 3 things. So we're going to play accordingly, and we're going to take this and this and this away. We're going to give you this and see if you can do it, right? And like that, so I think there's a great appeal in that as well. Like if Quinn has talked to wanting to be more physical, more aggressive, et cetera. Like I think this definitely plays into that as well.
Well, and my last question for me, kind of shifting more towards the personnel. Do you have a pulse or sense of what Adam Peters and the front office may feel like is their biggest needs, or what they need to do going forward for this offseason? Because I feel like the last 2 offseasons, they kind of replicated each other as far as we know. We're only going to sign these 1-year deals. We're not going to commit to long-term things. And they had specific things they went out there and got. But now after this season, which was a disappointing season, of course, injuries played a big part of that as well. Do you have an indication of where they want to shift or what they feel like the needs are for this team going into the offseason?
Well, the couple things that Peters mentioned, the season-ending presser, were younger, more athletic, right? But he also brought up pass rusher. You need to get some pass rushers. Like Dorrance Armstrong was really good for them, but once he was hurt, and I think Jacob Martin did exactly what they would have thought, right? Von Miller did about what he thought, but they need more dudes up front. They need some youth up front as well. So I think like that to me was an indication. But you also talk about like they talk a lot about position versatility, and maybe getting a guy in the back end who can do multiple things for you that help with those disguises. One of the reasons why Minnesota disguised well is because of the versatility of guys like Harrison Smith. So
John, don't you know a guy from your alma mater?
I may know. I may know a guy number 7 who fits exactly that. But they're also going to be pass rushers available at the same time. So, but I do think you need to get a guy, whether it's Caleb Downs or someone down the road in that draft, who can do that for you. Because like I think in the modern era of football, if you can get a guy that can cover in the slot, play back deep, be kind of like a linebacker in there in that 200-pound range, like that's a really good thing to find. So but the one thing Peters brought up was the first thing he brought up was pass rusher, younger, athletic, and then pass rusher. So I think if you need to find some guys up front, like they have one guy in their rotation who's under 25. That was Johnny Newton. Like you need to get more than that. You need to get some guys up front who can bring some juice. and build with, because like they just do not have that foundation on defense at this point. You've got to start building that foundation.
There it is, ladies and gentlemen. John Keim of ESPN, the John Keim Report podcast. You can find it on all your platforms and YouTube, and John _Keim on Twitter. Appreciate you, boss man, and stay safe out there. Don't slip on no ice, bro. Hurt your hip.
I'm trying to avoid that, man. It's been a chore this week. So, but yeah, I'm trying to stay warm first and foremost.
Oh,
thanks for
interviews
having me
are this week. Interviews are this week, right? For the OC, for the assistants, or is it?
Yeah. I would expect that to be wrapped up sometime in the next week, and then for a press conference, it's going to be after the Super Bowl at some point. Okay. Probably a couple. But as far as like the staff, they'll finish that. Then they'll have a press conference with the coordinators, probably a couple days after the Super Bowl ends, and then by that point they'll have the full staff assembled. I know there was talk they were going to do it this week, but I think they want the full staff, so that way they're not like, hey, what do you think about this coach or that coach? What are you going to do here? When they get the full staff, then they can answer every question, and Quinn can answer every question about why he made these moves. So that'll be after the Super Bowl.
John, do you think the offensive side of the staff is filled, and really they're trying to align with their defense? Because if you look at another team that just hired a head coach, Pittsburgh Steelers, Mike McCarthy is moving fast with every single hire.
So I think on offense, I would say it depends. And I think one guy I'm curious to see what he does is Brian Johnson. Like, what does he want to come back? Does he feel he was passed over? And I do believe they want him back. It's more like, how is he feeling about it? And so that's the thing that I think I'll be curious to see what happens there, because if not, then you got to hire someone else and get someone experienced. I think that's the thing with Blough. You need to get that experienced voice in there with him. A couple experienced voices for sure, right? Johnson has play calling experience. Anthony Lynn has it. But if Johnson decides that he wants to go somewhere else, then you're going to need to bring in an experienced voice. And I think that's one of the benefits for Jones. First of all, his experience is just deeper. But secondly, then you have Dan Quinn there too, who has done this, right? But you need to have that guy in offense. But I do think the offensive staff is more set. I think we also know, like, with the offense, it was more about a philosophical change than it was about like, it needs to be blown up. On defense, they're just like, it didn't look good. So you knew there were going to be more changes there, right? So yeah, but I think that's a guy that I think they're waiting on is Johnson at this point. That's the main one that I've heard.
Appreciate you, John. Fellas, y'all boys stay safe. Dre, you know what time it is tonight at midnight for the Fed guys. So fingers crossed.
Yes.
You know what time it is. But all right, John. All right.
Thanks, guys.
Hey, appreciate it, John.
Appreciate you guys. Thanks.
Watch him throw the ball, we gon' pick it off. You gon' let him hit the hole or you gon' cut it off. You gon' play through fourth and long or you gon' punt it off. Your defenders, heavy hitters, put your pads in. Don't be looking for the ref to throw no flags in. Keep the helmet on, keep the cleats tight. You the type to want to win by any means, right? You should look alive, this is Trap or Dive.